I think you may have answered this in part, but at the beginning you showed what was called General Order 16 or something. You know, the statement that said, don't, you know, we won't read or take any information from the outside
Policy
world.
16, yes.
Policy 16.
Yes.
I mean, that was such a clear statement that you had there right before. So what motivated that, right? You know, so was that concerns about legal issues, or was it?
I believe that was, that was concerns about legal issue. I think, you know, it's much simpler to just say, no, I don't want to hear what you have to say, because then you don't have any worry about IP or entanglements. It's just simpler. So it was a very simple statement. And today's world is much, much more complicated. But that was what motivated that statement. And it's the benefits of stepping into that complicated world that have convinced us that it's worth the entanglements. Does that answer your question?
So the concept of startup business or startup businesses within your big company, how far do you push actually that system? Do you push it to an independent cap table where the IEs, I think it's called innovation entrepreneurs, or independent decision makers, or do you push it like a working group? How far do you go with the concept?
So do you mean at the start of the process when we first get the proposals in?
Yeah, well, when you really build this startup within your company, is it an independent spin-out, or is it just a working group where you are having that kind of entrepreneurial environment? Or is it an independent cap table, but you still have the control of a buyback?
It's so you're talking about the Catalyst team. The question is the Catalyst team. Is it
Yes.
still? So that was outside the divisions. So the Catalyst team was still within the technology organization, but the director of that reported right to the head, and the 5 people reported to him, and so they had freedom to do what they wanted to do. Does that answer your question?
Well, not
Okay.
exactly. So I just want to know, are these IEs, the innovation entrepreneurs, are they then participating in the percent of the new spin-out, or is it just a kind of innovation platform?
Are the IEs participating in the new spin-out?
Yes. Are they percentage-wise part of this new entity?
And when you say new entity, the ownership.
Is there an ownership associated with these spin-outs?
Oh, so you mean the product launches and things that come out of the opportunity?
But you have this build a startup within your, and you have a buyback system.
Oh, buy back the startup. So that is an analogy, actually. So yeah, so it wasn't actually a startup. It was a Catalyst team that expanded back into the organization. But the IEs are part of the organizational structure, and they reside in the division.
They reside inside.
Yes. So that was just an analogy. Yeah.
Over here, Lisa. Hi, I'm Carl Klimek with the Square One Education Network out of Detroit. Thanks for your comments today. Really appreciate them. Your slide, best practices to next practices. Could you embellish that a little bit, meaning maybe specifically toward your team members, your employees, how have you gone about identifying the best practices in some capacity, and then when you've identified next practices, what is that processing like? What is that step toward next practices, and then how do you adopt them?
Yeah, I would say on the best practices and next practices, we're definitely learning how to identify next practices. But for best practices, we do the things that you all probably do. We benchmark versus other companies. We also look internally, and we look for, if you've read the book Switch, look for bright spots, see where it's working in the company, and then try and spread that out. So it's easier to find best practices and spread them. But for the next practices, it's hard, and so we're going through a process of trying to envision where we see our connected innovation organization going in the future, and then figuring out what it might take to get there. So I would say I don't really have good answer yet on what's a great way to come up with next practices, because we're learning as we go on that.
Oh, thank you. I actually have two questions. One is on the removing the bitter taste of food. You actually made that as a very general statement, not related to soups, which I thought was really interesting. And then you moved it. What my question is, if a company comes in with a compound that they think will work, then do you collaborate with them and they do the testing, or you do the testing, or you do it together? And that's my first question. How do you implement that? And the second question, are the people fighting in the organization to be part of your innovation team?
So the first question is on the sodium or the bitter compounds. And that statement up there is just what's on the card. And by the way, I have a few decks of these cards. I'll leave them here if you're interested to come see me. The brief, the one-page brief on the website would have more information. And it would have things such as the compound must survive retorting or whatever temperature, pressure combination. But usually it depends a lot if it's testing that the person can do to prove the concept before they send the proposal and they do it. If it's something that we only have the capability to do, then we'll work with them, we'll get a sample, we'll try it. So that's collaborative. And then the second part of the question is everybody batting down the walls to try and get to the innovation organization. You know, it's a pretty desirable place to be. And yeah, it's one of those jobs with a little bit of cachet. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. To realize the value of these innovations that occurred in this way, did you have to do any kind of business model innovation or different metrics or ways of recognizing and measuring the value that's created? Or do they
Yes.
fit nicely right into your pipeline and business model?
Yeah, no, that's a big question on all the proposals we get in is like, how do they fit into the business model? And finance has become one of my friends because I'm always asking them, you know, so I have this amount of information, which is not very much. It came in a proposal. I can get this much, you know, help me figure out if this has any hope of fitting into a business model or not. And that's kind of where the, our triage starts with, does this have any hope at all of working in our business model? And then as you progress, you try and get tighter and tighter until you can say yes or no, it will work or it won't work. But yeah, that always comes into it pretty early on, that question.
Lisa? I wonder, since you said that you go to scientific meetings and other venues in which people who work in food and nutrition already are working, it seems like it's going to be very easy to get to the people that would be the, quote, usual suspects, end quote. Do you do anything to try and get to the less predictable people who work in scientific fields, you know, neuroscience or some other area where you can affect taste, not so much at the taste receptor, but someplace else? Do you deal with behavioral scientists? Do you go places sort of outside the most predictable ones to find your collaborators?
Yes, we try to go outside the usual suspects to find collaborators. We watch the patent field. We look who's creating inventions and intellectual property in the area, and we try and make sure we connect with them. We are well connected to universities that we feel are doing research that's important in areas. We've worked sometimes with outside firms to scope the landscape of who's working in the area just to see if there's people that we're missing that we should connect to. So we make an effort to go very broad. And that's actually one of the hardest things we found is to make sure you're talking to the right people. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I, in fact, liked the first slide you said that, which declaring that current innovation is not up to the standard, so, which is good because most entities, including NASA, are always doing something even today. And so it's not about we're not doing innovation, we need to look at a different model. My question is that in your structure, working structure, how much the need for a new innovation process or practices, how does it affect the business model of, say, do you have the same amount of resources or you have to compete with existing resources and find new allocation, or how do you all deal with it? Because that's one thing that at NASA that it's an exciting and frustrating time period because our model is kind of like in the transition. You know, it's breaking up, but at the same time, there's opportunities there. But how do you all deal with that in your organization?
So how do we deal with the finding resources for?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll just comment on the finding a new way to do innovation. We found that that is important in communicating as this change of work happens, because you don't want to tell people, hey, we're replacing your innovation. It's really about accelerating, enhancing the things they're doing now. And for resources, you know, I would say it's in any organization that's full of smart, creative people, you always have more ideas than resources, and you always have more things you can do than you could actually work on. And that was the case before we started on this journey, and that still is the case today. And so prioritization has been very important. And when I came into this role, each of the business units, mine included, went through a process of identifying what are the critical business needs that we really need to make sure we work on. And as I bring opportunities forward to the business team, I usually use that in my communication, like, okay, here's this really interesting thing that's this cool, but it does or it doesn't fit with the needs that we're looking at. We didn't increase resources, so this is a change in the way we're working. Theoretically, as you get more external resources working on your projects, then you should be able to accomplish more. But I would say we don't have a good metric for that at the moment. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and the thing that what we have is in your case, it's a bottom-up approach. You go to the business and say, these are the ideas and what can we do. In our case, sometimes it's both, and sometimes it comes from the top down. So it's very difficult to, you know, we're in the process of doing what they ask us to do. So we get lost in what we get to say, what we need to do also.
Yes, so getting lost, because if you already have your projects and the people on top are telling you what to work on, then how can you work on these other things? And when I started in my role, that was actually the response from a lot of the other people in the organization. They're like, don't bring me more opportunities because I've got enough to work on. And what needs to happen and what is happening is whatever they are working on, it should be a critical business need, because if they're working on it and it's not a critical business need, then that needs to be taken care of. If it's a critical business need, then they can apply the tools to what they're working on. So in those cases, it's not bringing in something new, it's applying this way of working to what they're already working on to accelerate it and enhance it.
How about one more question, if there is one, for Lisa, and then we'll go to our breakout groups. Is there one more? There's one more, okay.
Hi, can you talk a little bit more about Tech Connect, and if there's a reward system, how do you get people to constantly go back and help other people and answer their problems?
So how do we get people to constantly go back and answer the problems? Yeah, because it's people who are asking the problems on Tech Connect are pretty motivated, like they need something. Although I have to say, I still have to bring it up to people sometimes, like, oh, did you remember to post on Tech Connect? What we find is actually people love to share their knowledge. And so there are people in the organization who regularly make sure they go there. It comes out as a weekly, I think it's weekly, an email. It's not too frequent that it clogs up your inbox, but it says, hey, new questions have been posted, here they are. And it's maybe 6 or 7, so you can read very quickly. And then there is a little bit of reward that goes on, because the people who go on there quite a lot, sometimes they're given a little extra something, a gift certificate or something, or a pat on the back. But actually, mostly it's been pretty self-sustaining.
Thank you, Lisa, very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to all the speakers and panelists today. That brings us to the close of our sort of prepared material. I think that last question pulled out a great point to reinforce that, much like we're looking at using open innovation within NASA, these are tools in a toolkit. So it's not it's not a or, it's not replacing things. These are just trying to throw new problem-solving tools into the toolkit. It does take some energy to get those going, so I think that was a good question. What we'd like you to do now, I know you've made a lot of connections from last night through the day, through lunch. There was a lot of energy over in the lunchroom. Hopefully you've got a little bit of that left this afternoon. We'd like you to go out into some breakout tables. There are some themes. If they don't work for you, form your own table. A table can be 2 people. There's no preset notion. What we'd like you to do is connect, and then we'll come back at 4:15. We're actually picked up 15 minutes, so we're only 15 minutes off. And do a little bit of a close. And what we'd like you to, there will be note takers at your table, but we'd like to collect some ideas. It can just be ideas at this point, from the folks you've met, from the ideas you've heard, of how you might envision, or are there any other connections you've made today that you'd like to pursue, to Jeff's point. So right now our enabling function is to have this website and to have this forum and to keep those conversations going. So we'll post your ideas for others to review. So it could be a project, it could be a challenge. Remember we were talking about working across, maybe there's some interagency challenges or some public-private challenges you have that others might resonate with. The other thing is we got some of your core capabilities in, so if you could still send us those, we'll post them, because you can also look at what each of you do for a living, what your core capabilities are, and there may be some connections there just on a service connection or a cross-consulting connection. So please do get us those core capabilities so we can post them. So I hope you've thought of some interesting ideas and connections. Even if it's just, I met so-and-so and we'd like to follow up, that'd be great. So we'd like to collect that today so we can keep the conversations going. So please go spend an hour. There are tables, there are facilitators, there are note takers, there are some open tables if you just want to continue these general conversations around challenges or projects. That would be great. We'll come back 4:15, a little bit of closing. Maybe hear a little bit of feedback from you today, but please fill out the survey also, because we want to keep improving this model. And we promised 2 things. I think Jeff had a great point about being outdoors. We promised not to have a meeting here in August, because then you'll have the shared pain also, because it'll be 95 degrees and 95% humidity. We won't do that to you outside. So please go ahead and enjoy an hour breakout. Let's come back at 4:15. And one more thing, we have membership certificates for you. We have just one per organization. So see either Tacey, Cindy, or McGee, and pick up your certificate if you haven't done so. Thanks. We'll see you back in an hour.